I've outlived my whole family at my age. When you're really alone, it's very hard because all you have is the walls around you. And
David Cruz wanted someone to do things with. He found Bonnie. Bonnie wasn't real. A Facebook friend request. A woman named Bonnie Fleck, an interior decorator from Indianapolis. Video calls, declarations of love. And then, one request at a time, $47,000 wired out of a 70-year-old man's accounts, including money from the home equity loan he'd saved for emergencies. The home he's lived in for years is now at risk. Here on Love or Lie, this one starts with loneliness and ends with a scammer in Nigeria who used AI to fake a face and a voice. Stick with me on this one. David Cruz is 70 years old. He lives in Pasco County, Florida, and when he's not at Mass, you'll find him volunteering. That's who David is, a man who gives his time to other people, who shows up for his community, who has spent his life in service to something beyond himself. He's also alone. I've outlived my whole family, he said, just like that. Simple and devastating. No dramatics. Just the truth of a 70-year-old man who has watched everyone he grew up with disappear one by one until the only things left are the walls of his house and whatever he fills his days with. He's not bitter about it. He volunteers, he goes to church, he keeps moving. But there's a specific kind of loneliness that comes from outliving your whole family. Not the loneliness of being unloved, but the loneliness of having no one left who knew you when. No one who shares your history. No one to just sit with. You sort of like to find somebody to do things with, he said.
you sort of like to find somebody to do things with.
That's it. That's the entire vulnerability. Not greed, not desperation. Just a 70-year-old man who wanted someone to share his days with. And in February, it seemed like that someone had arrived. February. A Facebook friend request from a woman named Bonnie Fleck. Interior decorator. Indianapolis. Her profile looked real. Her photos looked real. She reached out to him. Felt like God had given me the right person, David said.
Felt like God had given me, the right person.
They talked. He asked if they could speak on the phone. He wanted to hear her voice, make it real. They did. And then they video chatted, a woman's face on the screen, warm and present, telling David she loved him. That face was AI generated. That voice was AI generated. Everything David saw and heard from Bonnie Fleck was manufactured, a digital construction built specifically to make a lonely 70-year-old man feel found. Hi, David Cruz. It's me, Bonnie. I love you with all my heart.
Hello, David Cruz. It's me, Bonnie. I love you with all my heart.
They made tentative plans to meet, and then Bonnie had news. A company in Australia wanted to hire her for a major contract. $1.5 million. Life-changing work. The only problem, she wasn't aware of the paperwork she'd need to legally work in Australia. She needed $9,000 to sort it out. David didn't have $9,000. He told her he only had $5,000.
And she wasn't aware of the paperwork that she needed to work in Australia. So it was about $9,000 for that paperwork. At first, I told her, well, I only have $5,000. And then she said that wasn't enough.
She said that wasn't enough. So David went somewhere he'd never planned to go. The home equity loan he kept locked away for genuine emergencies. He wired the money. She said, "Don't worry, I'll pay you back." And she told me she was getting paid $1.5 million for the contract.
She said, don't worry, I'll pay you back. And she told me she was getting paid $1.5 million for the contract.
The logic tracked if you trusted the person delivering it. A temporary loan to someone you love against a guaranteed payday. People do that for family. David did it for Bonnie. The $9,000 didn't fix it. There was more paperwork. Another issue. Another amount needed. This is the drip method. The way these scams work when they're targeting someone who doesn't have unlimited funds. You don't ask for everything at once. You ask for what they have, then you wait, then you ask again. Each request is framed as a temporary problem with a guaranteed solution just ahead. Each payment brings the reunion, Bonnie actually showing up, the relationship becoming real. One step closer. Another $25,000. David said that was all he had left.
All I had was 25, and I had already lent her almost half of that.
What he didn't say out loud was that he'd already given her almost half of that in earlier transfers. He was now sending money he didn't really have to close a gap that kept moving. This time the instructions changed: wire it through a Bitcoin QR code. Not a bank transfer, cryptocurrency. Untraceable. The switch in method is always a tell in hindsight, but in the middle of it, it just felt like a different logistics request from someone he trusted. Total sent to Bonnie, $47,000. Then David filed a report with the Pasco County Sheriff's Office. He brought detectives dozens of screenshots, months of conversations, the AI video messages, the wire transfer records, the Bitcoin QR codes, everything. Because David had been careful in the way careful people are careful, he documented. Detectives traced the Bonnie Fleck profile back to Nigeria. The woman on the video calls didn't exist. The voice saying, "I love you with all of my heart," was generated by software. The interior decorator from Indianapolis was a fiction built in a room on the other side of the world by someone who had done this before and would do it again. David Cruz sent $47,000 to a scammer in Nigeria who spent a few months pretending to love him. Look, if this story is hitting you, share it. Not just for David, but for every person in your life who is older, alone, and looking for a connection in the same places scammers are hunting. A share right now might be the thing that stops it. Do that. Back to David. $47,000 is gone. A significant chunk of it came from the home equity loan David kept for emergencies, which means the home he has lived in for years, the one place that is entirely his, is now collateral against a debt he took on for a woman who never existed. He's at risk of losing it. Think about that for a second. David Cruz, a man who volunteers, who goes to mass, who has outlived his entire family and still chooses to show up for other people, is now facing the possibility of losing his home because he wanted someone to do things with. Because he felt what God had given him the right person. Because a scammer in Nigeria spent a few months saying, "I love you with all my heart," through an AI face on a screen. Lost any amount of self-worth, he said. Feelings of not realizing this sooner.
I felt I was going to lose everything that I have. Lost any amount of self-worth feelings, of not realizing this sooner.
The hope is his story will inspire others his age not to fall for something like this. Jennifer Vaglis, Fox 13 News.
That's the second robbery. The first one takes the money. The second one takes the way you see yourself. David isn't just grieving $47,000, he's grieving the relationship he thought he had, the future he thought was coming. And now the sense that he should have known better. He didn't. He couldn't have. Because what was done to him was sophisticated, patient, and built on a genuine human need that no amount of street smarts fully protects against. Romance scams are the single most emotionally destructive category of fraud because they don't just take money, they manufacture and then destroy a real human connection. The FBI reported Americans lost over $1.3 billion to romance scams in a single recent year. Seniors are disproportionately targeted because they're more likely to be isolated, more likely to have accessible savings, and, as David's case shows, more likely to be looking for genuine connection in the same digital spaces where scammers operate. The AI layer is new, and it's changing everything. A convincing fake face used to require significant technical skill. Now it requires a subscription and a few minutes of setup. The video calls that made Bonnie feel real to David, the thing that separated this from a simple catfish, can be generated in real time, customized to look like whoever they've told you they are. You can be looking at a face, hearing a voice, watching someone react to what you're saying, and none of it is human. The Bitcoin QR code request is the other tell. Always comes later in the relationship once trust is established because crypto is specifically chosen for being untraceable. By the time David scanned that code, the money was already beyond recovery. As of this report, Pasco County Sheriff's detectives have the case and dozens of screenshots of evidence. The Bonnie Fleck profile has been traced to Nigeria. No arrest has been made. The $47,000 has not been recovered. David's home equity loan remains outstanding. He came forward specifically hoping his story would stop other people his age from going through the same thing. The investigation is ongoing with no public resolution. David Cruz has outlived his whole family. He volunteers. He goes to mass. He wanted someone to sit with, someone to do things with, someone to fill the space that 70 years of living and losing leaves behind. Someone in Nigeria figured that out. Built a face. Built a voice. Said, "I love you with all my heart." Through a screen for months, and took $47,000 and the home equity loan David had saved for real emergencies. Bonnie Fleck never existed, but the loneliness she found was completely real. That's why it worked. That's why it always works. I'm Jack. If this made you want to check in on someone older in your life, do it today, not tomorrow. Forward this to someone who needs to see it before they get that friend request. There's another story next week. I'll see you then.